Okay, so just to tie this all together before we really get started in earnest, 6 week cycle for Ontology 101, split into 2 sessions apiece, two first sessions on subject matter expert engagement, where our goal is to extract competency questions, which we'll then use in the following 2 sessions to create design patterns, visual representations that will inform and will be designed so that we can create, in the last 2 sessions, OWL encodings that we will pop open in something like Protégé or Top Braid that will allow us to run reasoners over, ask questions about. In fact, it will allow us to take those competency questions that we uncovered in the first 2 sessions of the cycle, put those into Sparkle, a query language that we use against OWL and RDF, and test ourselves to see if our OWL encoding actually can answer those questions. And so 2, 2, and 2. After that, rinse and repeat. So on the 7th meeting, right, starting how to the 7th meeting, we'll be kicking off another 2 sessions subject matter expert engagement. And this is how the cycle runs. And so it is not this group, it's a 101 group, so it's not intended for you to stay here forever. It's intended for you to get down these basics, and then we'll ship you off into another group. We do have group 201 on the offing. It has a different cycle. We'll run this in concert with 101 so that folks can like transition smoothly over there. And running through 101 and 201, the plan is that we'll get you sophisticated to some extent so that you can actually go do work on your own, or more likely go do work in some of the other working groups that we have. So we have some working groups on like the Common Core Ontologies design patterns, or like mapping groups between the Information Exchange Standard and BFO. These are working groups that you're welcome to join now. But if you're just getting into this, you probably want to get some of these basic like skills, technologies, like habits down early before you jump in, because you might be a little lost if you jumped in now. But that's kind of the trajectory for these meetings. 101, 6 cycles, 201, 6 cycles, then get you in a place where you can maybe join some of the more sophisticated groups and start doing some work that's, working on your own, or working with groups of people who are publishing high quality research, creating design patterns that are pushing forward the vision of the community, so forth and so on. So I'll pause there. I've been talking for a minute. Are there any questions, comments, concerns, compliments? What you got?
As far as compliments, this is really cool.
Thank you. Yeah, Bill.
I want to let everyone else comment or compliment before I go. So, anyone else? I just have a kind of a question for John.
Yes, sir.
So you mentioned competency questions and subject matter expert interviews. So we're gonna engage these subject matter experts. I've heard, and I'll put it in the chat down here in the right. So it's going to pop up here in the chat. So I've heard competency questions called other things. I've heard them called decision support questions. I've heard them called research questions, and I just put that in there because I thought this was kind of neat. This was from those that conference we just had in Italy.
Yeah.
John, where they had research questions that they wanted to build ontologies around. And so you might hear them referred to as something slightly different than the competency question, but essentially it's all. John, correct me if I'm saying this wrong. We're trying to pull out of the expert, because experts speak in natural language, and then they're thinking about data about their area of expertise, and they get very conflated in their minds. And when they say things to each other, they can cut through a lot of the logic. They know what each other means. Our job is to pull that out in more precise questions that can be turned into a computer readable graph.
Yeah.
So you'll hear competency question, you'll hear research question, you'll hear decision support question. It's essentially just a set of questions that serve as requirements for the ontology. the ontology is going to have to help represent these questions in a graph there.
Yeah, that's right.
Done.
So you will hear these referred to in different ways. The kind of the underlying structure that I'm aiming for when I'm thinking about engaging with competency question construction from subject matter experts is I'm always thinking, and this is something you'll pick up on as you become more sophisticated. I'm always thinking about what questions can I automate checking, right? So how precise can I get their questions so that I can encode this in a query language that I can use in like a workflow that automatically checks my work. And so there are other types of questions. Some are questions for like requirements, questions about like research avenues, or decision support questions that may be different. Maybe you can't take these in every case questions and convert them into a Sparkle query. Maybe you'd need more Sparkle queries than one, or maybe they're just not the sorts of things you would ask questions against an ontology for. Those are all valuable. They have uses in like a general workflow. But for me, and for this one-on-one, I want us to focus on really specific, precise questions as carefully as we can to kind of guide our modeling. Insofar as those questions can be encoded into Sparkle query language. And if you don't know anything about Sparkle, it's fine, because if we can get through the design pattern and the OWL encoding, which we'll be walking through, we'll be able to use that representation to ask the questions that we're after, especially if we've used those competency questions to kind of guide us as we're building the OWL file. So you don't really need to know Sparkle in this session. Sparkle will be a 201 topic. I'll provide the queries here. And we'll sync up and get into alignment there with our competency questions and our OWL encoding and our Sparkle as we pass through 101. But good point to bring up. There, people talk in various ways, and we have kind of a specific target here, which you'll see as we get there. As we make progress, hopefully it'll become clearer and clearer why we're asking questions the way we do and what sorts of information we're looking for. Yeah. We got another hand up. This is from Bruno.
Yes, John, just a question. Is this the classical process for specifying an ontology? I mean, you start by conversation with the people, and after that, extract the concepts in the way of competency questions. And after that, you go through the process that told. Is this the classical way? I'm sorry if the question is not so smart, but
yeah.
I just want to know if this is
there are a couple of ways to do this. And so, but I'll give you kind of the bigger picture. So one classical way to do this is to think really hard about the domain and build an ontology and hope that it answers some questions. That's one. Another way is to, and I don't know which one's classical and which one's, I know that there's like different paradigms for this. Another way is to have kind of a subject matter led way, or subject matter expert led way of constructing ontologies. So you're kind of like listening to the SME. They're telling you what needs to be on the ontology. They're telling you like how it should be structured, what its format should be. Those two ways I don't find much use for in engineering practice, and it's for different reasons. The first way, you're kind of building models, like abstract conceptual models, but you're not an expert. You got to go read a lot. Maybe you can get some competency and expertise over time in building things, but also you don't really have SME in buy-in, like stakeholder buy-in. They don't know what you're doing. You're going to have a hard time selling it to them because you kind of build this thing on your own. The second one it's kind of the other side, because you'll have a lot of stakeholder buy-in because they've essentially built the thing with you. I'm reluctant to do that because that involves kind of having questions with subject matter experts of an ontological nature. And so instead of you like using your expertise to build something that they might use or may not use because they don't understand it, now you're trying to train them to do what you do, so that they have buy-in. And so I think that's also not a great way to go. I don't think it scales. And I also I think it's kind of, it puts our neck on the line, because now we have a bunch of subject matter experts who believe that they're competent in ontologies and they're going to go do what ontologists typically do. It's very fun building things. They're going to build a lot of stuff as non-experts, which I think is just as bad, if not as bad, as like me thinking really hard about virology and then just go building a bunch of virus ontologies, like, because like who's going to use them? I'm not an expert. So those are like two extremes. I think these both have pedigree. People have been writing about doing this, pursuing projects in these ways over the years. One of the other ways is what we're doing here, a traditional strategy, which is competency question driven. So this is not novel in some respects, competency question driven design, where you're kind of using or treating the stakeholders or subject matter experts as not as like co-engineers, but as informants. So like, tell me what you want me to do. I don't care what they think about the ontology. I don't show the subject matter experts the ontology. I show them a platform. I give them a web interface. Like I show them that. That's what they want. I don't try to teach them what we do. I have an expertise, they have theirs. And this is very similar to standard software engineering. Like you go tell somebody, hey, I'll build you a web interface. They don't just build whatever they want without talking to the expert. They also don't train the stakeholder to like learn Java, right? Because they build the Java and then they give them an interface. And that's the direction I think we should pursue. There is an additional aspect of this, which we get into in more sophisticated classes, which is this kind of competency question driven design itself is susceptible to creating silos. This kind of like narrow biased ontology development. And so if you are like thinking about the kind of workflow here, you'll say, oh, I've got a bunch of questions. I've got a model according to those questions. Well, look, you've gotten questions from one or more subject matter experts that may conflict with other subject matter experts. How exactly do we kind of like bridge these things together? And so this strategy we're pursuing here is actually part of a larger strategy, which we won't get into in 101, but we will in later sessions, like later, more sophisticated sessions, where we don't just model according to the competency questions, but in fact, we model according to, well, you use logic and the logic of an upper level ontology like BFO to start disambiguating the various ways in which data could be interpreted, even if the subject matter expert isn't themselves interpreting it that way, because that's the way that we're able to connect up to other subject matter experts who aren't in the room and kind of insulate ourselves from creating siloed efforts. And so it's more of an expansive disambiguation effort around data using subject matter experts as informants. But honestly, as time goes on and we're building, we sort of need less and less of that informant, and we just kind of hear what people are saying, and we help them find their competency questions or the questions they're needing to answer in a larger logical space of representations. And so a good example of this is like some suites in the Oboe Foundry that have different perspectives on the same domain, because different experts think about the same domain differently. We sort of want that, like different perspectives is important, but we want to encode that precisely so that we can flip back and forth between them, and we don't want to take a privileged stand because a lot of this research is out in the open. And I think that at the heart is like, if you take any lesson away from this, the strategy now, which is not a traditional strategy, but it is one that I think is the way forward to really kind of break into a new era for ontology engineering. So when I advocate, it's the one people at UB advocate, is we are fundamentally about logical disambiguation, systematic disambiguation. And by that, I don't mean find a privileged way of interpreting the data. I mean, find the logical space of interpretations of the data. And so in that's how we avoid silos.
Okay, thank you.
So,
and for example, can I ask just one more question?
Yeah.
For example, in software engineering context, for example, you start with a kind of behavior that you want that is software, performs. For example, I have an idea of an app, for example, and do I have something similar in ontology engineering? All starts with a need of structuring information. I don't know if you can understand, but in software engineering, we know that we start with a need or a requirement that it's basically a behavior that a software can, do.
That's right.
But in the context of ontology engineering, we can think that all starts with this need of disambiguation, or what is the main or the starting point?
Mm-hmm. So we do have, like, in general, the need that I see. We're trying to address interoperability problems while improving data quality,
Great,
right?
great.
So
Okay.
I always have in mind, that's my boogeyman. Silos everywhere. I don't have to look far and I'll trip over one. But you can address silos in many ways. You can stitch together databases. People do this all the time. It's like one-off solutions. But I'm not interested in those. That's the easy way, I think. It's not even an easy way. It's a hard way to do it, but it's still the easy way. The reason I'm not interested in that because there's no like, and the reason I use ontology engineering instead of just like code is because I can't leverage tools very easily to like identify gaps across data set, do federated querying, like see inconsistencies. So I want formal precision so that I can identify problems in my data. And so when I have the sort of a principled way to develop, like based on kind of simple logic, principled way to develop ontologies, connect these data sets, then I also have a principled way to leverage tools to help me identify gaps, inconsistencies in the data. And then I can turn that around and say, hey, subject matter experts, did you mean to say this? This, do you mean this? And sometimes they'll say, yeah, that's fine. Let them say, yeah. But few people want to be inconsistent. And everybody knows data quality is a problem. And so nobody knows what principled way to follow to solve them other than kind of some data cleaning principles, which are only get you very far. Another way of maybe putting this is like, like database normalization. We're going to the moon, man. A lot of people stop at second. We're going to 3, 4. We're going for broke. And we want that quality. But we're not going to be able to do it in our heads. We're not going to be able to do it manually. We're not going to be able to stitch it together at scale. We need a principled way to get there, to get farther along the kind of enrichment pathway. And that's what we're doing. We kind of take a step back, look at things from a broader perspective, and set ourselves up right so that we can leverage tools downstream to help alleviate some of the burdens that, I mean, everybody knows are there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So how about we get into some subject matter expert engagement practice? So we're going to need two volunteers who want to jump in and play the role of subject matter experts. And then we're going to poke and prod and try to get out competency questions from them.
John, if you want, I can be a SME if people want to interview me.
I love it.
Do you want me to pick what I am the SME of?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. So everyone, I am a subject matter expert in the maintenance of aircraft engines. Okay. So I work for a big company like say Boeing or Raytheon or Rolls-Royce, one of these big engine, right? And so my area of expertise is aircraft engines. And I have a particular set of problems, but do you want me to get more specific, John, or is that enough?
That's a good place to start. And we'll need one other person to jump in and help you out.
Okay.
We want different levels of engagement and different levels of competency. And so you could just somebody jump in. You don't even have to know anything about the domain. In fact, that might be
Sure, I'll jump in.
okay. There we go. All right, so we have two subject matter experts. So we're here. Let me set the stage. Nice candlelight dinner. No, I'm kidding. We'll set the stage. You're here, you're an ontology engineer, and you're tasked with engaging with subject matter experts. They have a need. You've heard, let's say you've been giving just this information, just what Bill has said. That's as much info as you know. Your task, you need to ask them questions, uncover pain points they have, issues they have, those pain points and issues that they're having with their data, with representations of things, maybe like communication. Those are all on offer. Like you want to identify pain points mostly because that'll guide you in the construction of questions that you can use to represent information that they have to kind of address or help solve some of the problems that they have. So I'm always thinking when I'm talking to SMEs initially, what do you need? What do you need me for? And pain points, great way to get that because they know where they are. They got them. Now you got to poke and prod and figure out what their pain points are. Who wants to give it a shot first?
Now remember, I'm a maintenance expert for these aircraft.
Want me to kick it off? You want to join? I'll do this.
Sure.
Hey guys. So sorry for talking with food in my mouth. It's a habit. Every time somebody asks me a question, I've got food in my mouth. I'm just constant eater, so forgive me. Observe what I just did. I'm kind of a flexible presenter, speaker. I took this thing, took an opportunity to kind of level set and be like friendly. Got Bill to smile. This is a good thing, right? And it's a human foible, right? We all know. I got food in my mouth. I shouldn't be talking. I'm gonna do it anyway. I'm gonna call attention to it. Make me a little more.
As long as it doesn't come out and hit the screen
Bit
and
all over
stick
the
to the
screen.
screen,
Yeah.
that would be gross.
Yeah, there's an element of charm to this game, right? You want to make people feel comfortable with you. You want, because the more comfortable they are, the more willing they're going to be to tell you about the pain. The more willing they are to tell you about the pain, the more willing the more able you're going to be to address it. So, all right. Thank you for taking the time. So sorry I had food in my mouth, as I said. I'm really glad we could talk. I know you're busy. I acknowledge that you know they're busy. I know you're busy, and I'm here. You know, we got a brief readout on where your area of expertise is. We've been brought in to help solve some problems. I'm happy to tell you about what we do, but generally speaking, I don't want to go into the details because it's kind of heady technological stuff. I don't know if you'd be interested, but basically what we do, kind of in a like rule of thumb, is we try to connect, and we basically try to connect to data, the semantics across data and clean data. And so I'm sure you have like data quality problems. Everybody does have a hard time extracting value from the data, or maybe you have like workflows that could be improved. Really, I'm here for today in our initial meeting. That is just to kind of figure out what those pain points around data are, representations of data. What makes your job hard is what I'm mostly interested in, because if I know that, then I think I can most likely be able to give you a hand. I won't make any promises, but it's pretty good track record of being able to help you out in an easy, digestible way. So yeah, man. I know, sorry to put that on you, especially I came in here like, but yeah, what's your pain points, if you don't mind?
Yeah, so John, a little bit about myself. I came up through the ranks. So I actually did maintenance on these engines and I rose up to like team leader and now I'm like director of maintenance for a very large enterprise organization. So we have a fleet of aircraft and each of those aircraft have 8 engines on each one. And we have all these different disparate data sets that like
Mhm.
I we know that there's a lot of value in those, but we're making decision based on hunches.
Yeah.
So what I'll give you one example is like it's trouble just tracking what engine is on which aircraft. So that's step number one is we have to account for all our fleet of not just aircraft, but our fleet of engines. And they're being on this aircraft, right? Or it got moved to this other aircraft.
Yeah. That's a pain.
Yeah. So we have about 80 aircraft
Mhm.
and each one has 8 engines on it. And sometimes we swap out the engines and we do certain maintenance activities so that engine may get pulled. So tracking all this is problematic for us.
Yeah. So I assume you've got some like a bandwidth issue on the amount of people you have and like who you can send where. So you're probably engaging in some like optimization problems, right? And you
Absolutely.
garbage
Yeah.
in, garbage out situation. Like you need to know who to allocate where at a certain time for maintenance, but you kind of like you're doing a lot of guesswork. Can I assume that you actually probably have data to make this work, but it's probably stored in different places. So you have to do a lot of thinking about, oh, I've got this piece of information over here. I've got this piece of information over there. If I put that
Yep.
together, then I know this is happening over here, and maybe I should send folks there.
Yeah. So we have numerous systems for maintenance, right?
Yeah.
And so in one system we may just track startups. So every time an engine starts up, that's a lot of strain on the engine, right? So we track that in one system. If we pull an engine to do a certain preventative maintenance activity, that's tracked in another system.
Good.
Flight operations, that's tracked in an operational database. And so, yeah, we've got data everywhere, and we have a feeling that if we could bring it together in the right way, we're going to be able to answer these questions.
Very good. So let me pause here and let me ask folks who are watching. So, one, were any of you writing any of that down? What Bill was saying. Good thing we recorded this. Definitely should write this stuff down. Like if you're not recording, if you're recording, go back, maybe have some transcripts. That's always valuable. I use transcripts a lot because then I can kind of have it summarized. But note, he dropped a lot of important key terms like flight operations. We just had a conversation about his pain point. Like I sussed out. Thank you, Bill. With your help, I sussed out this is kind of a traditional optimization problem issue. And you'll see these all the time. Like you'll see, and so you'll get kind of a feel for them if you haven't already. If you work with data, you probably know a lot of data come in from different systems. You have humans trying to stitch together the system info in their heads because they have to move out and do stuff, right? Like I got this database telling me X, this database telling me Y, this database telling me Z, and I've got to like kind of in my head create something of a profile and make a decision based on that. Often incomplete data, often like susceptible to me not being very good because of my time constraints on making appropriate inferences, just kind of guesswork a lot of the time. Maybe there's more data that could be pulled in that we don't have, or maybe I just don't have access to those data sets. Ultimately, a lot of what that profiling, that like model building that you're doing in your head could be automated. Like if these databases were singing with one another, the choir would be fine, right? But instead you're putting this together in your head. So let me say that, and then let me ask you folks here in 101, with that setup, kind of a traditional optimization problem, garbage in, garbage out, workflow that Bill is doing in his head, what kind of questions do you think we should be poking him with to identify our competency questions that'll help us guide modeling? Let's think about it for a second. There are no wrong answers yet. Next time there will be, but not here. And let me say this one other thing, because I know you guys are thinking, pause. Okay. It's okay if you find yourself in a subject matter engagement or subject SME engagement. It's fine if you get stuck and don't know what to ask. Okay. That happens sometimes for many reasons. Maybe you didn't have enough coffee, maybe you just genuinely are a little lost. Maybe early on. This happens to everybody. You can always do this, and you should feel encouraged to do this. It's not like don't let your pride get in the way. You can always say, kind of a little pro tip, look at the subject matter experts and say, just directly, what kind of question would you want me to ask? What kind of question would you want answered from your systems, right? Do you have a specific question? Kind of put that on them. This isn't you giving up. It's a way to engage them for sure. And they're probably smart people, clever people who have worked in this system for a while. They know a lot more about it than you do. And they really do know it. They probably have an answer to that question. So you could like kind of suss it out. You could just be direct. Both are good strategies. Yeah. I usually do both, honestly. So.
Hey, John, as you're saying that, you're making me think. I did throw out a hint and I was like, why am I saying this? A lot of times the SME, like John just said, they'll have an idea, like I have this question, and the best question is one that requires data from these different systems. And they know it's been like in their head. So they may already have an idea of decision support questions that they want answered. So you can just ask them directly, like, what kinds of questions do you want to ask the data?
Absolutely.
John, do you want me to post this cheat sheet from my aerospace days?
Oh, yeah,
it's based on conversations you and I have had. So look in the chat there. This is actual aerospace maintenance and engineers that said, hey, we think these are the types of DSQs we want you to ask.
Mhm.
So as you can see there, let's say we're going to ask DSQs in like iterations, right? We're going to go from one type of DSQ to another. This is high-tech people, like with PhDs in engineering and guys that have been doing maintenance for 30 years on these high-dollar aircraft engines. And the first one was, hey, I want you just to account for all my stuff.
Mhm.
Remember, I was saying I've got aircraft and I've got engines, and the engines have parts, right? So what are all the things I care about? That's that first circle right there. Account for the entities that I care about. Then once we can account for those things, and you see the little bullet comments down there of the things I care about as a maintenance or as an engineer. And then the second one is, what are the problems I'm having? Right? So those would be a different type of DSQ. And then that third one is, can we start to correlate these things with space and time and sites and things like that? So that the questions get increasingly more interesting as you go.
Yeah. Yeah, John.
Yeah, I guess I'm hearing myself. What is that?
Say that one more time.
Okay. Okay. Sorry. Now I can talk.
Oh, I thought it was
So
okay. There you go. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So the first thing is to account for entities and then identify problems. But I've also heard that sort of when you're finding or when you're designing an ontology, you need to have questions already in mind that you're going to answer. So how does that process look like?
So this is the strategy, right? Like we're hearing this, like engaging with SMEs to find the questions. And so at this point, I'm kind of not yet thinking about the entities. What happens is the entities will kind of fall out of the questions. And so once I have the questions, I know what entities I need to answer them. And so there is, in next session, we'll talk in more detail. We have a principled way to classify the entities. But right now, the kind of name of the game is get those questions down. We're going to look at the questions, those pain point questions, and we'll see next time, like, how do I unpack what entities I need? And that's going to get into what Bill is showing you, because there's like a 1 through 7 list that we can follow, kind of make it's kind of dumb proof, right? Like it's almost like a who, what, where, when bucket thing, right? And we can walk through it. And I have some slides that kind of really slowly walk you through it. And then that actually helps us build the design patterns. And so but always the hardest part is the questions, getting the questions right. Because everything after this, you'll see as we work through, it's kind of a recipe. Like, but humans are always the hard part, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
John makes a good point about this. We made this graphic after probably a couple of weeks of getting the questions out. And so one of the questions to the experts would have been like, you're saying a fleet, like how many aircraft are in your fleet? There's a question, and we know that we care about aircraft, we care about the engines, the 8 major component parts of the engine. So the DSQs start to get more precise as you go.
That's right.
So this was the product of probably a couple weeks of developing the decision support questions. So good observation.
I mean, it might be a little on the nose or broad, but I guess my gut reaction of hearing that conversation, my first question I would just ask is, I don't know anything about your world, your field, your day-to-day life, but you're asking me to solve a problem for you. So I guess my question would be, in your day-to-day, what are the main things that you feel pile up, take too much time, or too strenuous, whatever it might be? What makes your job harder than it needs to be? That's kind of broad, but I would imagine that's a good starting point to break down from.
Good. So, and it's good if, like, for our purposes here, if we can just highlight one, like they got problems, they got lots of problems. Everybody has lots of problems. The biggest one. I always go for the biggest one. And if it's too big, then I go for something else. But like I always try to solve what's the most bang for your buck that we can actually solve. So what is the biggest hurdle in your day-to-day? Alex's question's on point. It's kind of broad, but broad in a way that'll let you fill in the blanks, you know? And that's kind of where we want to be because you're the subject matter expert.
Okay, so a big problem for us, and I kind of hinted at it already, is tracking the location of our engines and what they're doing. So we're not even talking maintenance right now. We're talking about where is the engine, what is it doing?
Yeah. Okay.
And we're talking startups, we're talking operate flights. So that just tracking my 8x80 engines, and we've got backup engines that are on standby that we can swap out. Just tracking those is a problem.
Mm-hmm. This is good. So we are benefited by a subject matter expert who knows exactly what they want to answer. This doesn't always happen. This is great, but it's a pretty clear set of questions that we have on the table. He needs to understand tracking. Like he doesn't know like clearly enough where all of the engines are and what they're doing at a given time. So like this can go hand to hand. You can tease these out in different competency questions, right? But like location, when an engine is part of something else, when it's functioning, when it's malfunctioning, what its status is, how long has it been in operation? Because there are metrics around how long, like maybe you need to cycle out, maybe something needs maintenance. And since these are maintenance questions, like they're optimization problems, like there's going to be like set standards, like at a certain interval or certain use, you should come in and do some maintenance on this. Also, if something breaks, you should come and do maintenance on it, right? But typically they're like set intervals, regular intervals at which you would expect people to go out and check things. And in my experience, honestly, those intervals, like every 6 weeks, check your engine, like with all these engines, like that's usually the optimization problem that gets in the way the most. It's almost not often the emergency situations. Most groups I've talked to who have to do something like this struggle with just figuring out how to optimize and schedule regular maintenance. So
I'll tell you how this gets so sophisticated that I'll tell you a story that they had a team that all they did was track startups. Remember, I mentioned that because most of the wear and the tear of an aircraft engine is when it starts up. It puts an incredible strain on the engine. And then when it takes off, obviously.
Yeah.
So they had a team that just tracked startups. And they would get a piece of data that said, hey, there was a startup. Somewhere in the world, there was a startup. And what we got them to, and they're like, we don't know which aircraft it is. We don't know which engine it is. But if you put it in a full ontology of the fleet of engines, and you could see, oh, that startup originated in this city and it went to this city. So in other words, the ontology told them the two airports it went between. They're like, oh, now you can infer, oh, it's definitely this aircraft.
Yeah.
And they didn't know that. But once you plugged it into the ontology, you say, okay, there was a startup in the world. It started at this. Oh, it was at this airport. Oh, and it flew to Seattle. Now we know which aircraft it was. That was super duper valuable to them. And they couldn't figure it out because they're guys that are just trying to figure out the startup, and all they have is the data. We plugged it into an ontology, and it answered the question for them.
That's great. This is
So, John.
Yeah.
Oh,
Go ahead. Nope, go right ahead.
No, but now I can, for example, ask the first basic competency question. For example, which airplane is this engine from, or what airplane does this engine belong to? It's a kind of two basic questions, competency questions. Can we write down and go from there?
Absolutely. Detailed questions about like the structure of these aircrafts, like maintenance, like when's the regular intervals, what's associated with what. These are exactly the sorts of questions you want to get into. And again, we don't have to boil the ocean here insofar as we're trying to identify everything. We just kind of want to answer the questions or get those questions out that are going to be most useful for that tracking and use pair that Bill has identified. So you're absolutely right. On the money.
Right, but
Bruno,
in the process, I'm sorry. In the
oh, Bruno, real quick. So back to that use case that I was saying. So what they had to do is they had to pull in another data set. So they had a startup. So the DSQ became, do you have an airport? Yes, we have an airport. Now that's a different data set. And then you ask them, okay, do you know where it's departing that airport? Where is it going to fly to? And they're like, no. Well, there's another data set that has airport connections, and it says, oh, that's this flight. The plane started up, took off at this time, and it landed at Seattle. It's a completely different data set. Once you pull it in, it answers their question for them.
Mm, yeah, but now, John, how can I say it? So in this process, in this interview, kind of interview, I say this competence question and I validate with William if this competence question makes sense. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, this is the workflow, right? Like these questions
Okay.
are going to be used to guide, like one, to guide the development of the ontology. So we're in step with the SME, but also
Okay.
if we've done our job well, they can be encoded in something like Sparkle, which can be part of a workflow, and say GitHub like triggers actions that checks our ontology for like quality control, but also to see if we are in fact answering questions. We can get validation if we've done our job well. So something like unit testing, like guidance and unit tests on the back end. And that's really the goal. I want to do as
Yeah.
little manual work as possible. I'm lazy. You should be too.
Yeah, but firstly, we have to have all these competence questions, right? All the competence questions. It's an interactive process, workflow, I think.
It
But
is. It is. It absolutely is. And as we uncover more and as you think through competency questions, more are going to come. And when I do the broader, like longer, like 4-hour tutorial exercises, I give a lot of these, and like I'll ask questions about like averages, like what's the average speed of this engine, something, and people start thinking about it and they're like, whoa, that's not just one question. That's a couple of questions. Like that can be quite challenging. And so you'll see that here. But we have 1 minute and then I have to go to another meeting. So let me just kind of summarize where we've been. So outline the cycle. So next week we'll have round 2 of the subject matter expert engagement. And what we're going to do is we're going to get into more detail about the competency questions, focusing on like location of engines and functioning of engines over time, in the interest of like optimizing maintenance problems for these aircrafts. And so we'll start there. We'll start unpacking, and we'll be able to use some of what Bill was talking about in this bucket strategy to like help guide us in what questions we want to answer. Like, what are all the things that I could touch? What are where are they located? What time are times relevant? Like, what processes are involved? And that'll help us when we get over to the design patterns section to start building up like visual representations that'll help us in code. Since it's how should we make sure?
John, if you got to go, I can field some of these
Okay,
questions.
that's
If you got to
fantastic.
go.
Yeah, so I do have a
So
meeting to pop off on, but thanks so much, everybody. I'm looking forward to round 2. Hopefully this was valuable. And if you have questions that you think would help guide us in our next meeting, post them in the Slack. Like this is a place for us to discuss them, and we can pick those up next week. Take care.
before John leaves, we don't need 57 DSQs. We start out with like 3 to 5 really good ones. And the experts will look at them and say, yes, if I can answer those, I will love you. I will name my firstborn child after you. They'll get really excited.
That's right. All right, man. You're the host. We'll see you soon.
All right.